Hello! You are listening to Talking Utter Slot, the podcast about having fun with slot cars. Be it Skeletrix or Carrera, NSR or Slot It, we love them all. Joining me all the way from his top secret slot car research and development centre, otherwise known as his garden shed, it's
Pedro.
This week we emerge from the shadow of Mr. Slot Car's DN4 and talk about Carrera BMWs, 3D printed Ken block cars from Area 71, what might be an affordable tyre tour from Process, and we hear how Pedro's preparation for the big race at Gaydon is going.
I see what you did there, Scott, with the Mr. Shadow emerging. Mr. Slot Car emerging from the shadows. Very good. Can-Am's emerging from the shadow. Credit where credit is due, Scott. That was pure, unadulterated genius. And we and the imaginary Canadian listener, hello, imaginary Canadian listener, we're not worthy. Worthy, even. But I noted, I think I put it in the show notes, that Can-Am is not in the shadows anymore, not just because of Mr. Slot Car, but Mr. Slot Car and Mr. Thunder Slot. Giovanni somebody, is it? I think. Anywho, I went to the Pendle website sometime this week, noted that the shadow is still in stock. The restock hasn't sold out. I'm not saying anything else about that. But also alongside it, on his, is it the latest arrivals things, there was the Thunder Slot McLarens, one of which I kind of think I need, the blue one. Fuji.
Is it because it's blue?
No, it isn't. I can't explain what it is, but I see it and it calls to me. It's like a siren song that only I hear. So I will run my ship onto the rocks of the Thunder Slots McLaren. This is getting tortuous.
It's very weird. Probably best we move on. But actually, you did mention we have a listener in Canada.
No, we have an imaginary listener in Canada.
Well, it's an imaginary listener who can write comments on YouTube, so that's quite good.
And telekinesis, paranormal.
In fact, we should say thank you to the listeners, and it is plural. It is plural listeners, more than one, who have contacted us or left comments after last week's episode. So thank you all; it's much appreciated. And others, assuming there are others, feel free to join in. Although one of the people,
because were you about to say about one of the people that you alleged was listening?
No, they're definitely listening.
You can't say that. But who do you believe, Scott, is listening to this nonsense?
I have no idea.
You've forgotten even. Oh, my Lord. Who is famous for exotic sports cars, often bespoke to his specifications, and he lives in the Middle East?
Oh, the Sultan of Brunei.
The Sultan of Brunei listens to us, dear listeners. Allegedly.
Well,
I think he's got too much on his plate to listen to this.
You probably should explain why we think that. Well,
let's not explain ourselves, Scott. That would go horribly wrong.
Moving on.
And for the record, although I haven't yet seen it, I do believe the Mr. Slot Car Shadow is probably quite a quality thing.
It is quite hard to tune into the slot car media environment and not see something about the Mr. Slot Car Shadow.
It's a car that has caused a lot of interest, but I think it's a car that's caused a lot of interest in a particularly small niche of a small niche group of hobbyists, because they only did 1,950 of them, apparently. Sean, apologies for the impersonation last time out, Sean. Sincere apologies. We got a warning about not doing any more impersonations, didn't we?
No. Only Lancashire ones. You're allowed to do Scottish ones, apparently. Which I think, yeah. So if you want to do
I quite like the Lancashire accent, though. But regardless. But Can-Am isn't in the shadows, is it? Because Mr. Slot Car's DN4, Thunder Slot have just released 2 more McLarens. I went to Sean's site and saw 3 in a row on his latest arrivals, and I thought, that's interesting. Can-Am, very much a niche thing, I would have said. I mean, it was really before my time. I only like it in...
You're not that young.
No, but I wasn't paying attention. I mean, it may have been. I was paying attention to James Hunt and F1 and Barry Sheen and all that tomfoolery. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I wasn't paying attention, probably because I don't think the British media covered it.
Well, I mean, I think the motorsport press did, because McLaren were doing very well. It was a lot of British-built cars for a long time doing quite well. The British drivers did quite well, etc. So, yeah, I think it was quite a money spinner for what then were the Grand Prix teams who weren't making much money.
But the thing is, if you say, well, the British motorsport press were covering it, this could well be true, but I was only 10, 11, 12, and so I was buying Topper and the Beano, not Motorsport or Autocar or Autosport, whatever they're called. So that's my excuse. In hindsight, in a nostalgic, can it be nostalgic if I wasn't there? Interesting. Discuss. Maybe in a romantic way, I look back on the era before it went all silly and wing carish, and I think, wow, cojones or what?
They were certainly big beasts on not very sticky tyres. So there was lots of good. Anyway. We should move on.
Moving on.
Caught our eye. What's caught your eye this week? What do you want?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll briefly take us back to that Can-Am trio. I do think when I go to Gaydon, I am going to be looking for that blue Fuji McLaren. I think, possibly, maybe. Not sure. I think I am. It calls to me, that car. I like the colour, and I don't know why. Like I say, there's a romanticism for me with Can-Am, and I like it, and I think I might get one. But the thing that really caught my eye was, I think I went to one of Sean's pages of soon-to-be-released, what is it called, pre-order pages, and I looked at what Slotted are doing, and there's a good old tranche of decent-looking things coming from them, including the Old Spice Calibra. I don't know if it was a Yerst run thing or what, but I really like that livery. And said livery.
That's two.
That'll get a YouTube comment. I said it twice. Oh my god, livery. What are we paying out on this week? Don't say. I will dig it out because I should have done this beforehand, and I'll take a picture so you can put it on the YouTube. I once did a conversion of a Ninko Calibra into that livery with, I think it was Run-DMC decals. Little known fact that Run-DMC, not only did they produce a lot of rap songs, but they also produced a series of decals.
That is strange. But then, it's not. You've got Pete Waterman, famous for all of those hits. He's into trains.
This is true.
Alice Cooper likes golf. Rod Stewart, he's into trains. I don't think we've got, we could do with a celebrity music industry person who's into slot cars.
Well, hang on. No, come on. Your lot, Slot Mods, didn't they do? Lordy. They did a track for Zach Brown. I don't think he's exactly royalty, is he?
I don't think he sings terribly well. I mean, I don't think he claims to be fair, but I don't think he's a music industry star.
Sorry, I missed that it was a music. The requirement was a music industry star.
Anyway, good. Getting back to your Can-Am and Slottits sort of thing.
There's a lot of nice Slottits coming, and I am poised to pre-order that Calibra because we did DTMs last night at Oxford, and they're just a deep joy. I love the DTMs; they run really, really well. And obviously, shall I mention it or will you?
No, you mention it.
I'll mention it. I got a podium.
Which was there? Was it second or third? Because obviously you didn't win because you'd have said you won. So no. Second or third?
You get a podium. It's a podium. That's the thing. It's a podium.
You don't get
on the podium?
No, you finished.
Okay. No. I earned it, and I earned a podium. Yeah, it was third. All right.
Okay, it's like it's like my pet hate with football commentators who say that somebody's going to, they've netted the ball. No, they've scored a goal. They haven't netted the ball.
But if we're going to start on commentators, the thing that really gets my goat, and I was listening to a podcast earlier. We'll get back to slot cars in a minute.
No, I think we should just be. There's more than one thing gets your goat. But anyway,
Okay, there's two. They were talking about, was it Perez being a street circuit specialist? And I get so riled. These are the top drivers in the world. They're specialists at driving cars, not necessarily at driving one particular. They're just good at driving, full stop. I don't think they hired Perez because he's just good at street circuits. They hired him because he's good at all sorts of circuits, and he beat Max Verstappen.
Well, I don't watch modern Formula One, as you know, so I don't really know what you're talking about. But
well, Sterling Moss lost his seat, and Max Verstappen has taken it.
Well, I would venture to suggest that modern Formula One car drivers are very good at driving modern Formula One cars, but they're not necessarily very good at driving in general, because you don't. I mean, I know they don't do it very much these days,
sadly,
but you don't see them kind of emerging into other series and sort of suddenly being head and shoulders above everybody else.
And are we suddenly dragged inexorably back to Can-Am and Mr. Surtees? Did he win a championship? Oh, am I getting that wrong? Did he win a championship?
Well, famously on 2 wheels and 4. I don't know if he won Can-Am or not, but he certainly won the World Championship. He won the World Championship on bikes. Not really. Yeah. He was, but again, I think the old school guys were very good. I mean, it was less of an engineering exercise, isn't it? Modern drivers are executing an engineering plan.
One of the interesting things will be to see how Jensen does at Le Mans with his
NASCAR. Yeah. Well,
it amuses me.
It's going to be great. It is. There's so many highlights about Le Mans this year. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, I watched all 6 hours of the race from Spa last Saturday. Loved it. Great. Bit of rain at the start. People fly fantastic. And the supposed best drivers in the world couldn't even handle driving around on wet and slightly damp conditions without speeding off. But and then 24-hour Le Mans is in 4 weeks' time. And so I'm already starting my preparations, which means watching old races on DVD and on YouTube, and leafing through old books and looking at pictures and probably stroking the odd model. Anyway, speaking of Le Mans and stroking,
I had different images then.
You would, but
Derek briefly.
One of the other things which has caught my eye, and I'm delighted about, is the Carrera there's a physical example popped up on Instagram, I think, of the Michael Fassbender driven Proton competition, Matt Green 911 that he crashed a lot whilst he was learning to drive, and drove at Le Mans last year, I think, was the race he took part in. I'm guessing he's not racing this year because I haven't seen him in any of the support races or the build-up races.
I thought he was supposed to be.
Well, maybe,
but I thought he was supposed to be.
Anyway, that car looks fat. Even before I knew Michael Fassbender was in it, I thought it looked great when I saw that car at the race. And so I'm delighted that they're doing a model of it. I've already got a couple of Carrera 911 RSRs. Usual thing, quite heavy, not very grippy, not the fastest cars, but they're lovely. So I'll happily add another one. You
will. I won't. Even though I loved that series, even though Michael Fassbender is he's on my list. Should I turn? I think he's a great bloke. I love him to bits actually, because I think he's such a dude. He's a bit ugly, obviously, and he's a bit out of condition, but he's all right. And they taught him to drive a car. So I've waxed lyrical about this before. I think a brilliant series of programs on YouTube. Catch them, they're brilliant. I've said brilliant so many times that I think that also is brilliant. But I won't be buying one of those cars because I've got increasingly disappointed with my M1, and it's. So I gave it a run on. I tried to give it a run last night. It went about 5 foot down the track and then stopped dead. And actually stopped with the rear wheels up in the air at like 25 degrees, 30 degrees.
A stoppie? You did a
complete
stoppie.
Yeah, and it sat there with the rear wheels flailing because the dodgy old Ninko we've got, the guide, it was just too thick for it, and it just went thunk 4 or 5 feet, and that was it.
We should explain which car you're talking about.
Oh, sorry, my BMW Denim liveried M1. from Carrera, which I think is a beautiful thing still, and I'm going to have to think carefully about what I do with it, because I don't really want to have to do the hassle of putting an HRS, is it, chassis underneath, or find one of those plafets or something like that, or indeed go down that cul-de-sac, that dying technology that is 3D printing, and do it that way.
Well, before we move on to 3D printing, my Carrera BMW tale from this week, because literally as we were recording the last episode, I had a delivery, which was a box that contained a Carrera BMW CSL in green, gorgeous green, which is the Gosser beer. I think I'm saying that correctly. Apologies if I'm not. And although I've got one from Fly from years ago, this just called to me, and I got a bit of a bargain on eBay, actually. And it turned out it wasn't listed as such, but it turned out to be a digital car. So it was even more of a bargain, although not much use to me since I don't have digital chips available after the end of the show. But so but you can run Carrera Digital on analog. There's a little sequence of button pushes and trigger pulls that can make that work. And but my God, it's a heavy old beast. So I put it on the track, did a few laps, blah, 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 did a few more laps, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I'm really struggling to get this tail to stop waggling about. Stuck it on the handy scales, which I keep just to the end of the pit lane. And the Fly version of the same car is 81 grams. The Carrera one is 101 grams. So it's 25% heavier than the Fly model. Now that's quite a lot in any race car, and so it looks beautiful. I love it. Other thing I noticed was that there was the Carrera don't put Goodyear or whatever on the tires; they put Carrera, which is fine. So it doesn't have Goodyear written on the side of the car either, and it doesn't have Shell. So there's obviously some kind of, they didn't take the license or whatever. And I thought this was a consistent thing, but then I dug out some of my other Carrera Group 5 cars, and the tyres have got Carrera written on them, but it says Dunlop on the side of the car, and one of them even says Shell. So I'm not sure what the logic is there, or if indeed there is one. But to be honest, when they're going round, you don't really see that sort of thing. So I'm happy to forgive it. But what struck me is what an eclectic bunch Carrera Group 5 cars are. So I've got the Tommaso, the 3 Series, the 9.
Oh no! Have you got that Tommaso?
I've got the Tommaso. It's fantastic.
Oh, and, so disappointed with that. I don't know why. I just like saying Di Tommaso Pantera, but that was such a weird looking thing. I believe that is how weird it looked when it raced at Le Mans, isn't it?
It is.
Which was a disappointment to learn, really.
No, it's the great classic Group 5 thing, isn't it? Take a car, stick ridiculously wide boxy arches on it, hang a wing out the back, put a big chin spoiler on it, and off you go.
I agree with the principle, but I think the execution there was disappointing.
Well, they're consistent. Anyway, but so we've had a bit of a Carrera BMW, so maybe a regular feature, Carrera BMWs, when we buy some other ones. But you mentioned one possible solution for your M1 was to go 3D printed chassis, and the other thing which certainly caught my eye this week was the pictures, or more pictures, of the Area 71 3D printed Ken Block models that they're doing.
Yeah.
Not your. No. Is it just that the cars are not your thing, or is it because they're 3D printed, or is it both?
Actually, I think it's a holy trinity. Never got the Ken Block thing. Rest in peace. Never understood quite why he was such a hero. Don't like the cars. Nonsense. Don't like 3D printing. Boom,
okay.
Boom.
Definitely boom. Not. So you definitely won't be buying one of them.
I believe Area 71 do it quite well, but why would you want one of those? We're back to kind of road cars, aren't we? They're a form. What are they? They're like dragstery. I don't know what they are, but they're not race cars, and for that, I'm out.
Well, they're famous. They're famous cars, and so I think they're doing. Without checking the website, I think they're doing 4 or 5 of his cars, which were all much modified from sort of standard. I think he started off with kind of pretty standard rally cars, didn't he? But then they got more and more extreme. So I think I think they're interesting cars. They've got obviously a big high profile. Probably not famous enough to make 5,000 of them, but I think judging by the CAD images, I think it's CAD images that they're showing of the complexity of the models that Area 71 are going to be offering. They are kind of plastic kit level detail in terms of engines, but they look good.
And do you just buy a shell from them? Is it just shells, and then you're left to your own devices to put something underneath it?
I'm afraid I don't know. I didn't. I looked at the pretty pictures. Excellent. I didn't read any of the words. But
lead the blind on a podcast.
Well, that's it. Well, maybe somebody from Area 71 can get in touch. No.
Not after I've.
Not after you've done it. Well, we famously think 3D printing is a fad that's already over.
It's dying. It's last legs.
Clearly not.
I would say when we chatted before we started recording, because we actually try and do this professionally, or at least have a vague idea of what we're going to talk about, but then inevitably I go off on one.
To be fair, I think we hide it well, though.
I think it's totally covered. I've been a fool there and highlighted it, haven't I? That we go off on that.
You've looked behind the curtain. Yeah.
I did say that I think Kenneth was lauded by many for sort of not defining YouTube, but certainly having a big influence on how cars are shown on YouTube, and showed that content like what he put out, i.e. An Idiot Does Donuts, I'm oversimplifying a lot, awful lot, that there was a market for that, and that I think he is credited with being good for motorsports and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to say good things, but I'm struggling clearly.
It's just not your thing, that's all right. That's right.
No, it's not my thing at all. I don't get it, but that's fine. I did watch a video once where I believe he put his 13-year-old daughter in some mad device that pumped out insane power outputs, and just said, "There you go, dear, off you go down this runway," and off she went until it broke. So she had cojones. That's probably not quite biologically correct. It was obviously in the DNA, wasn't it?
Do you know how we haven't got a lawyer? So no. Anyway,
metaphorical cojones, not actually.
Metaphorical cojones.
Yeah.
Right. That's a bit
Stop
like an
digging.
imaginary.
Let's move on.
Like an imaginary Canadian. The other thing, before we move too far on, I think it's 3D printed. Again, if you're looking for details and facts, other slot car media is available. But there was interesting on Pendle. There was this tire truer from a brand I think called Process, which was new to me. Which looks relatively affordable. I mean, tire truers can be. I haven't got one because they're very expensive. This one is it's less than an MR slot car Shadow, so that's suddenly that's cheap. About 65, 70 quid. It looks so it's 3D printed, I guess, because it looks like CAD images that they've used to show it. But a relatively simple sort of setup. You put your car on it. You just put the car on and run that. Now, that looks sensible to me because I don't like stripping my cars and doing all sorts of unnecessary things. I know that's something you love doing. We'll come on to that in a minute. But tire truers, have you got a tire truer? And do you think it's worth having?
I have got a tire truer. I do think it's worth having. I don't think that thing is worth having at all. You've got to use your own car as the truing mechanism. So it's the transmission, it's the gears, it's the motor that you put under a little bit of stress as you true your tires. And for 60 odd quid, do you get a power supply? Or is it just what looks like a piece of plastic with a hole for the slot and a place for some sandpaper?
Okay, they won't be
I don't
high
know. I mean, it'll do the job, and like you point out, it is considerably cheaper than other things. I've got a tire razor, and I find it pretty damned good. But as I said to you, I do keep nicking myself on some of the sharp metal edges because I'm incompetent.
So a nicely 3D printed one would be
would have softer edges.
Would have softer edges. Yeah, I mean, I'm just very quickly reading down the thing. To be fair, it doesn't say that it's 3D printed. I'm making that assumption. I can't imagine it's injection molded, though. So
no, I would be out on the simple grounds that you're using your car as the as the motive, as the spinny thing.
Why is that such a problem?
Well, I don't know, but it just seems wrong. Well, you're going to put your car under a bit of more load than it probably would normally have, a little bit of wear and tear on it, whereas if you've got a separate truer, then it's doing it for you. You're also relying upon the hubs that you've got being pretty round in the first place, and if they're not, then you're making life hard for yourself. I don't know. I just thought, no. It's
not for you.
It's the 3D industry. We don't know if it's 3D, but it looks like the 3D industry trying to make another 3D product for something that doesn't actually need to be 3D printed.
Okay, all right. So not
weak argument. I accept.
Okay, I thought given anytime I've looked at other ones which have been sort of metal and all that, so they were in the hundreds of pounds, so this looks much more affordable. So interesting.
I believe I'm not 100% sure, but I think I paid about 120 odd for mine second hand. Yeah, second hand.
Wow.
And it cuts me every now and then when I use it. It's a fiddly darned thing as well, because you have to, each time you put an axle on, you have to kind of hook the rubber band around the drive shafty thing, and it's all a bit fiddly, which is my excuse for why I keep like going, ooh, cut myself. I don't cut myself. I just nick myself, and it's annoying.
So what you're saying is having a tire truer that you just leave the axle in the car and just put it on would be
so much easier. But they'll never think of that, Scott. They'll never think of that.
Okay. Anyway, before we move off of preparation, I think it's probably a very good moment because, again, before the show, you were flashing before my eyes bits of a car, which I think you intend, not just one of the cars you're preparing for your race at Gaydon in a few weeks' time. So I think the audience deserves an update on the prep that's going on. Last week we heard about how you were buying up every spare aluminium hub that could be supplied. What have you been doing this week?
Can I just say, I think I'm detecting a slightly mocking tone in your voice.
In which case I'll make it more obvious. What the... Look, whatever keeps you off the streets. I think that's
as I said to you as we preamble or arranged to record this afternoon, I have spent the morning, some of the morning, not all of the morning,
be honest.
Setting up. No, I've done other stuff.
He's been up all night.
I was fixing the guttering, if you must know. Oh, how dull is that? That's why I moved very quickly to setting up another Motorpod gear subassembly for in advance of the Polycar Grand Prix of Gaydon. I think I'm going to tackle it rather like what year was it Audi introduced the R8 and blew everyone away by changing an entire transmission at the back in about, I don't know, 5 minutes.
2000?
And everyone's like, oh, radical. It was, I was going to say 1999. Okay, it was 2000. I think I was opposite when they were doing it in the grandstands. Car comes in, and someone says, I think they're taking the whole of the rear. And in the space of, I think it was about 10 minutes, they took the whole of the rear off and put a whole new one on. That's genius. And I won't be allowed to do that, obviously, and I won't be able to work that quickly and yada, yada, yada. But I simply wanted another option tyre-wise, because I think I made it very clear last week. I'm serious about this. I'm taking it very seriously, and I got a podium yesterday, Scott. I'm on a roll.
I'll say yes. I gather the seriousness involves stripping this car down, which is not even your preferred race car. This is just the backup car, isn't it?
Well, I've got to decide there, because I did run briefly. I did a few laps on the 72 last night, having done a similar thing as I did this morning, stripping it down, lubing, and just cleaning and getting all the fluff and crap that was in there. I've never understand how slot cars manage to vacuum up quite so much crud. That's another thing entirely. But I cleaned up the Lotus 72 and I found some issues with it, and so I fixed it up and ran it yesterday. And it never has been particularly good, but I swear yesterday it was pretty nippy. So I'm now on the horns of a dilemma whether I will end up running that or the Ferrari. I will take both. If I'm allowed to sort of run them both before they have to go into scrutineering, then I'll make a decision on the day. I was also thinking, since I've never run on Polycar, potentially next week descending on you.
Oh,
obviously to say hello, but also to try my cars out on your track. I mean, if you're not there, it's not a problem. I'll let myself in through a window.
I'll leave the key.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was just about to say, are you going to test it on Polycar track? In which case, I'm going to suggest you come down and have a go.
Well, I've got to come and get my Renault out of the garage, because I've got to get that into an auction. And so I might, on the way, I'll have to sort of work out. I'm not convinced the Renault actually has a valid MOT at the moment. But if I do, I'll let you know.
Cool. I'll look forward to that. Means I have to tidy up. My God.
Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Jeez.
No, I really do have to tidy up.
Oh.
But the upside of tidying up is I'll probably find things that I've long since lost. I mean, it's one of, as I mentioned before, one of the joys of my slot shed is I go in there and I pull out, I look for something and I pull a crate out or a box out and I go, oh, look. For example, last week there was a polythene bag, navy blue, with Cosworth written on it. Now, I used to work at Cosworth. That was in 1995, 96. So getting on for 30 years ago.
Scott. You haven't done this in a long time. Who did you work with at Cosworth?
Oh,
anyone
lots
you can drop the name off?
Who do you want me to mention? Who would you like me to mention?
René Arnoux.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't. He'd long since retired by that point. No, anyway,
he's a sweet little fellow, René Arnoux. If you ever bump into him, he is quite enthusiastic. Oh, yeah. I've bumped into him twice, ironically, in Goodwood things, and on both occasions, I've slightly been like, "Oh, you're René Arnoux," and he's been just such a cheery little chap.
Oh, it's lovely. I was a fan of his when he was racing. I think it was that kind of the head forward, like he was trying to just push the car that little bit faster. So I was always a bit of a fan of his. Anyway, the point being, this Cosworth polythene bag, which must be at least 28 years old, in it was stuffed some old plastic Scalextric controllers to the tune of probably 6 or 7, body shells for Escort Cosworths and Sierra Cosworths, a hay bale, a piece of fencing, a barrel, and a couple of other bits and pieces. And it was
singular barrels, singular hay bale.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously at some point, at Cosworth, we used to get sent models by way of payment for the licensing. So right. Scalextrics would deliver box loads of Escort Cosworths, etc. And obviously some of these found their way home with me.
Did they now? Funny
but for some reason, I stripped them and so the bodies, engines, motors. I don't know what I thought I was doing, and I really had kind of forgotten I did it. Anyway, so this bag is full of bodies. So I'm the upside is I'm assuming at some point in the future I'll find another box or bag which will be full of motors and wheels and things, so I might be able to rebuild.
You can marry them up.
So yeah, so that's. Might be cringe. Anyway,
hang on. I'm curious. When you say you'd get it as payment, do you mean like a pallet's worth of 100 Cossies would appear, or just 2 or 3?
So instead of, I mean, I don't know what the numbers were, or I can't remember, I should say. So say there was a fee, a license fee for them using, making a model of the car because they used Cosworth in the description. Instead of getting that as money, we would have product delivered, and then that product would be given out to people sort of people who wrote in or whatever. So I used to, part of my job way back then was sending people slot cars as a thank you for writing in. Famously, in my Austin Rover days, I had on my desk 20 boxes of 6R4 models, 10 computer vision, and 10 yellow and blue Ternco ones, which were from the dreadful TV series, which are terrible TV series, but the 6R4 featured in it. And at the time, I thought...
Sorry, what TV series?
There was a TV series made, a drama, which featured a young chap who owned a garage going rally driving, and he went rally driving in a 6R4.
And what was it called?
6R4. I'm going to forget now. It's a long time ago. It's early 80s. I'll find it. And it's the car was liveried up for the filming in this fictitious oil company in blue and yellow. And Skeletrix made models of them. So what did I do? I happily gave away all the yellow and blue Ternco ones to anybody who wrote in, and I kept some of the computer vision ones. And which ones are worth a bloody fortune?
I'm guessing the ones you gave away.
Of course. Other investment advice from Scott Brownlee: don't take it.
There's another podcast there. We must start it immediately.
No.
Investment advice.
But before we go on this one, we've discovered a bit of a mystery. We think it's a case for Inspector Slot Car, don't we?
I've forgotten what we're talking about. Not for the first time.
Old men talking about slot cars.
There we go.
It's 40 minutes in and we may forget what we were going to tell you. You found something which involved Pioneer cars, and you sent me a link saying, look at these. You said
I bet I didn't say... I was going to say.
You said a bit more than that. Anyway, the gist of it was, look at these. And when I followed said links, the cars had disappeared to be replaced by an enigmatic message that said that these models had been discontinued or withdrawn or whatever.
Which isn't what normally happens on Sean's site when something is out of stock. It goes out of stock. Notice that the Shadow DN4 has not gone out of stock. Oh, just can't resist, can he? Now, I sent you a link to a green General Lee. How annoying is that? And I think it was a silver Stang. And these were what were they called? Dealer-only specials or something from Pioneer. And they were £125 each. I'll just let that settle. Because in the blurb it said something about having an authentic dealer sticker on it, and I just thought that means out there somewhere there are fake dealer stickers being put on Pioneer cars, and people are selling them for £100. I don't know. No, I just thought it curious. I wondered if they were not supposed to sell them.
Well, I guess the deal. I presume the dealer is not. It's not Ford dealers. It's Pioneer dealers. But it's the same at Christmas time with the two Chargers. There was a sort of a green one and a red one. Or a green and white, a red and white one, and then the dealers got a red and green one, and some of those popped up on the B of E, and they were about that sort of price, so or a bit more. So it's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon, but it's. I'm going to say it. I think I've said it before. I do wish Pioneer would actually do something new rather than just re-livery, repackage existing tat. It's not tat, but existing stuff. I think it's been a while since we've had a new model from them, and I'd like to see one. I'm not guaranteeing I'll buy it because Lord knows I don't buy it much. But I'd like to see them do some other American muscle, please. Not well, Santa Claus riding in a pink General Lee. That isn't right.
It's quite attractive, though. Talking of which, so as a way to end up, we're talking about the Inspector Slot Car will be looking into where the Pioneer authentic stickers went. The run up to Gaydon, which we're all very excited about, it's slot car Christmas in the middle of the summer. You mentioned the DN4 Shadow, and I saw someone saying they hadn't bought one yet, but if they found one still for sale in Gaydon, they would buy it. And you said something similar earlier when you were talking about that Thunderslot McLaren. You were talking about pre-ordering stuff that you definitely want, but this one you're letting fate intervene that you're going to you're going to arrive at Gaydon. If one is magically available, you might buy it.
I'm going to leave it in the hands of the slot gods.
The slot gods.
Because I'd also I'm also thinking on my Gaydon shopping list is maybe an SRC Capri. I'm blaming you for this, but I don't know quite why I've suddenly got to be in my bonnet about an SRC Capri.
Is it to go along with your SRC BMW?
Possibly. I don't know.
I didn't mention this to you earlier, actually. I found, as I do trawling YouTube, some great footage of Spa from 1970 or 71 or whatever.
Nice.
So there was the Capris, there was the BMWs.
Camaros?
No, there was also the big Merc AMG, the big orange thing. And I thought, it must be golly. So you've got your SRC BMW, your SR3 Capri, both going to be lovely, really fast out-the-box models, and you've got your big Carrera blunderbuss sort of thing. So that race is going to be easy to predict.
The Spa, the sort of 70s, 80s, seems to be a happy hunting ground at the moment for the manufacturers, isn't it? A bit. There's quite a few coming out. I mean, Scalextric have done a couple of Camaros and a Challenger. Was that Levi thing from Spa?
The Levi? Oh, yes, yeah. One of the chaps I had with a former industry insider, we'll leave it at that, said the rule of thumb is 30 years back from where you are is where the real market for stuff is.
It's the sweet spot. Interesting.
So if we're in 2023, then 1993. This doesn't explain why 70s Spa cars.
That doesn't explain it at all, Scott.
But they were saying that's actually, but it does explain why the Mansell Williams and the Senna Lotus and some of that stuff is coming back. But yeah. So maybe there's sort of waves. Maybe there's a kind of the nostalgia. Certainly for the 70s and 80s stuff for our generation, i.e., old people, seems to be where it's at. And also the models that were around at the time were pretty ropey. I mean, good example is the Williams and the Lotus. You know, when those came out from Scalextric in 1984, 85. I mean, they were not great models, but my God, I loved them. You know, that was as good as it was going to get.
Did you?
Now, and I've still got them. And don't tell anybody, but if you put some cheap replacement tyres on the old Lotus, it's much faster than the new one. But that's all tyres. And I drive slot cars, not tyres. Anyway, so there's a rule of thumb that if that's true, we should see a glut of early 90s cars coming through.
I'm trying to think when the Volvo estate car was running in the BTC CCC, because that surely must be coming in. That must have been 90s.
Was it? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it all merges into one with me. Sorry,
it does. Yeah,
but that's why I rely on Facebook memory telling me what I did.
I don't do Facebook.
Probably just as well, to be honest. Anyway, shall we wrap it up there?
Let's wrap it up. Put some string on it. Put a bow on it, and send it.
Send it out. Okay. Anyway, thank you for listening. And I guess it's always useful.
What was that? Was that you saying time to say goodbye? It's time to say goodbye, Scott.
It was me trying to say something semi-professionally and got it all wrong. Thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Promise that we'll take our tablets sooner before the next one so we can remember what we're meant to be talking about. And I'll hand you back to Pedro to say goodbye.
Goodbye. See you soon.